Have you ever paused to think how we truly learn? Not just the skills we acquire, but the shifts in mindsets that change who we become. Because in this world that's evolving faster than ever, where AI is now writing code, designing art, and even teaching students, the real question is what makes human learning still irreplaceable? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Learning Curve, the podcast where we explore the stories, mindsets, and experiments shaping the future of learning and leadership across the world. My name is Amandeep Singh Kohli, and I'm the Chief Business Officer at KNOLSKAPE for Asia Pacific. And today's episode is one that I've been personally looking forward to for a long, long time. This is with a dear friend, mentor, and customer. Our guest today is someone who truly embodies the art of transformation, Saurabh Jaggi, fondly known as Pixie. Pixie is the head of culture, learning, and talent development at Maxis Malaysia. And over the last 3 decades, he's worked across industries like hospitality, banking, consulting, and telecom, leading change, building learning ecosystems, and inspiring teams across continents. But here's what makes his story truly remarkable. He's not just a learning leader, he's also a storyteller, a simplifier, and someone who believes that resilience isn't just a skill, it's actually a way of living. From the kitchens of his family's iconic Moti Mahal and now Daryaganj, and for those who don't know, it's the birthplace of butter chicken, to the boardrooms of global giants like UBS and Maxis, Pixie's journey is all about curiosity, courage, and reinvention. Hi, Pixie, and welcome to the Learning Curve.
Thank you, Aman. That's a very kind start, very kind words.
So, Pixie, before we start, just out of curiosity for our learners, how did the name Pixie come about?
So many moons ago, while I was studying at Mount St. Mary's in Delhi, my bestie Vikram gave me this pet name. Unlike now, I was very lean, had a thin frame, spooky ears, and I resembled a comic character called Pixie. So everyone in
Okay.
school, teachers and students started calling me Pixie. Later in life, when I started work and I was traveling all over the world, people would not pronounce my name correctly, as it happens with most people from our side of the world.
Yeah.
And I used to feel bad correcting them, and even at times I used to feel very frustrated correcting them. So true to my nature, I wanted to simplify the situation, so I resorted to my pet name. And yeah, it's unique, easily pronounceable in any part of the world, and it was well taken. Also, I think most part of my life I've been driving process excellence, which is commonly called PEX. So PEX and Pixie sort of went hand in hand. Pixie the PEX guy, and sort of became a
Yeah.
brand in itself.
Yeah.
So yep, I've been carrying this name for a very long time now.
Nice, nice. You already have a headline for a book if you ever want to write one, Pixie the Pex. Awesome, great. That was amazing, Pixie. So before we actually go on to the topical discussion, what we usually do with our guests is a quick rapid fire round. These are about 8 to 10 questions. The idea is just to get you warmed up and not talk about the serious stuff which we'll come to later. The idea is for the audience to get to know you a little better. So rapid fire questions. The first thing that comes to your mind, and maybe short answers, as short as that can be, right? So if you're ready, we can start off with the first one, which is very close to your heart, even mine as well. What's the one food that you can never give up on? And of course, you cannot say butter chicken.
Or being a foodie, there are so many things, but if it has to be one, I would say rasgulla.
Rasgulla. Okay. So for our non-Indian audience who doesn't know that, it's a sweet white color dessert, usually with a lot of sugar, but extremely tempting. So if you have the chance to try one, do try it. Great. What is one trait that you have that very few people know about?
I'm very intuitive. I can read situations and people very well, and when in my zone, I can visualize what's happening, what's coming next.
Got it. No wonder I'm scared to always meet you in person.
No, no.
Which also brings us to the next question. Is that another trait of yours that your team often complains about, or is it something else?
uh, you know my team, so I think you'll have to ask them. But in my view, if you ask me, I think it's speed and rhythm of doing things. There is a term in lean, in the lean thinking called tuck time, tuck, TAKT. right?
Yeah.
So the pace of production needs to align with the rate of customer demand.
Hmm.
And it comes from, with the German terminology, started off with a symphony conductor, using a baton, and the instruments need to align with the pace and the rhythm of the baton, right? So that's
Right.
what takt really is. I want to
Wow.
believe it's speed and rhythm of doing things that my team will complain about.
Nice. That's definitely something I'm going to steal. One aspect of your role that you do not enjoy. This is a little controversial, but yes.
Dealing with so many cold calls, emails, LinkedIn messages with people trying to sell L&D products and services, it becomes so difficult to answer all these, to reply and to revert, in time. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah. Great. I hope you were not complaining about me reaching out to you both at
No, not at
KNOLSKAPE.
all. No, we have a good partnership, Aman, so I'm glad we do.
Likewise, likewise. Great. So the next rapid fire question for you is one book waiting to be read and why?
This is a book called The Digital Blur by a gentleman you might have heard of. His name is Rajiv Jayaraman.
I seem to recall hearing his name for
Seem
sure.
to recall? Yeah, it's a familiar name. So that's one book, very sweetly gifted to me last year. So it's on my coffee table right now, and I can't wait to read it.
Awesome, great. And this is a shameless plug for all those listening in. If you didn't realize, the book that Pixie is speaking about is written by our founder of KNOLSKAPE, Rajiv Jayaraman. So, Pixie, look forward to hearing your thoughts. I might warn you, though, that Rajiv loves to quiz people about his book. So, the next time when you're meeting and if he's there, he will definitely ask you if you've read it and be ready to answer some questions.
So give me a month of head start before Rajiv is planning his next trip to Malaysia. I will make
Yeah.
sure that I've read the book.
Got it, got it. And I won't tell you the cheat sheet to it is just upload it on ChatGPT and get some answers, but that's
Yeah,
not the cheat sheet.
yeah.
Awesome, lovely. What do you think will never change about learning? No matter how advanced AI is becoming.
Yeah, so AI will bring in a lot of disruption in the learning space. It already is. But I still believe there are so many programs where the human touch is absolutely essential. The war wounds, the empathy, sparking curiosity, the body language, expressions, emotions in the voice. I don't think AI will be able to conquer that. You still need that
Right.
just to improve the efficacy of the entire learning, of that topic.
Yeah, yeah. Very relevant, and that's something we'll definitely touch about even more in our main discussion. But on to the next question. If you could be born again, would you choose the same profession or something else?
Oh, I would love to be born as a very, very popular singer. One those rock concert types. Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
and I would want to own the Delhi Capitals and run them. Year after year.
Nice. Okay, last two questions. If God could grant you a superpower, what would you like it to be?
Oh, why just one? I would need more than one. Yeah, one. I think I would love to time travel, go back
Okay.
and fix things, predict what's happening in the future, and the associated power with that would be ability to influence people's mind, verbally or non-verbally, so that we can prevent all the badness that happens in the world. We can prevent that.
Okay. Wow, that's a nice answer. Last one. What are you learning nowadays outside of work?
Oh, I'm learning to communicate with my cats.
Oh, wow. How many
It's a
cats
big
do you
learning
have?
curve. I've got four.
Four cats. I didn't know you were a cat person, but that's something new. Nice.
I was always a dog person, but my daughter and my wife were cat people, and
Okay.
my daughter adopted one from the university, got her home, so I fell in love with her, and then we adopted three more from the street. So now we have four now.
Four. Wow. Okay. I'm sure that's a skill you'll have to pick up a lot over time because cats are
Yeah,
very
I'm
different.
enjoying that. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. That was a wonderful rapid fire round, Pixie. Let's move on to a more detailed discussion. Again, while these are serious questions, what we'd love to do is hear your personal experiences. And of course, you've had 3 decades of experience to talk about, something that the audience is really looking forward to learning from. You've driven change and operational excellence across financial services, multiple geographies, and then moved to HR in telecom, right? how did this transition happen? And one is, why did you want to move and do this change?
Sure. Thanks. Good question to start with. I think transition has been a constant in my life. Whether we talk about industry transition, like you said, I moved from hotels to insurance to banking, telecom. Whether it's domain transformation, I started with customer service, moved on to risk, then process excellence, then L&D, HR, and off we're talking about geographical transition.
Hmm.
Delhi, Mumbai, Scotland, Hyderabad, London, Singapore, Zurich, now KL. So transition has been a constant in my life. A large part of my life, I've driven process excellence or operational excellence in financial services, like right across all major continents. And there were two parts to the role. One was, addressing the process capability part, which is re-engineering, continuous improvement, and the second was people capability part, um, building people capability either to lead that change or to embrace that change.
Hmm.
Over a period of time, I really started enjoying the second part of the role more than the first part. So I must have
Okay.
trained, coached thousands of people across, 12, 13 countries across all levels, from an associate to senior management, university students. And this was very, very satisfying. So I was doing well. My peers told me that some of the trainings they attended of mine were the best they had ever had. It was paying me well. It was a niche skill. It gave me
Yeah.
a lot of satisfaction, and the skill was much in demand. So, in short, I found my ikigai, if I were to say.
Yeah.
And then I realized that if I wanted to become a chief learning officer, and UBS did give me the opportunity to move from the delivery space to setting up the learning academy in the process excellence function. But to
Hmm.
grow to a CLO, I had to move into mainstream human resources. And
Right.
Maxis gave me that opportunity. I think they were very kind and brave to consider me for that
Right.
role. A non HR person, a non telecom person, a non Malaysian to manage the head of learning role at Maxis. So
Yeah.
that's how the transition happened.
Wow, that's very interesting. So, if I were to take that example and say, if there's something you'd like to pass on to somebody who's looking to transition to a similar role like yours, any skill right now that you feel in hindsight he or she could learn that will make the transition easier?
Let me summarize that to maybe just three or four skills.
Sure.
That will really help people. One I would say is the power of storytelling. I think it's very, very critical. Second, ability to influence people and drive change.
Hmm.
And third would be thinking strategically and having the business acumen to connect the dots.
Got it.
Now, you'll be surprised I haven't spoken about any of the traditional learning domain kind of skills because I believe you don't need to be an L&D person or an HR person to become head of L&D. And I'm a live example of that. In fact,
Yeah.
today, I think as the world is progressing, um, relevant skills are more important than relevant experience, from a job assignment point of view. If I look at our very own example here, I am a non HR guy, but I'm leading culture, learning, talent, innovation at Maxis. The head of organizational development here is not an HR guy. He was leading strategy and consulting in his past life. The chief people officer is not an HR guy. So
Wow.
he's an ex chief sales officer of Maxis.
Yeah.
So just three people in the leadership team of HR are non-HR people, but they bring the other skills to the table, which is how we're
Yeah.
running the function, in a way. So I think these will help people. Yeah, these are critical skills.
Yeah. And I do realize this is something very unique to Maxis, but I think lovely to hear this. And maybe this is also, you've answered a part of my next question that, of course, your past experience, all your qualifications have been in the space of operational excellence and not in talent per
Yep.
se. Still, you're doing really well respected. Whenever I am in Malaysia at a conference, I do hear your name across when I'm speaking to other folks. Is this your secret sauce, the three, four skills that you mentioned, or is there something that we still don't know about?
No, I think this is the one. I think the biggest secret sauce is, like I said, the answer lies in the question itself. I think I'm able to do decent because I do not come from a traditional HR L&D space. So there's no comparison, no benchmark, no unnecessary past pressure of how to do things in a certain way. I drive the program with passion, with curiosity, and with astute principles of process excellence, which is my second nature. I
Yeah.
think like a consumer of learning, and I focus on outcomes which allow me to break away from traditional ways of thinking and doing things. So I think that's what the secret sauce really is.
Okay, great. I love that term, consumer of learning. I think aptly sums it up. Great. So, Pixie, let's go backward in time. Assume, we had that skill you spoke about of time travel, and go back to when you did your first job, right? Any lessons that you learned there that are still relevant and that you still carry those lessons from to till today?
Great question, Aman. I started my career back in 1995 with Meridian Hotel in New Delhi. I was a front office supervisor, doing check-ins for people coming in, large groups, airline crews, etc., and to make sure they were staying comfortably and doing customer service and stuff. There was one night a big group was checking in, and few flights had come in. Extremely busy night.
Hmm.
To manage the volumes with speed, one of my team members deviated from the check-in process and didn't take certain billing instructions for some people at the concurrence of the lobby manager, who was sort of heading the shift at that time. Now, a couple of days later, what happened when that group checked out? This particular guest had some consumables and he checked out without paying.
Okay.
And that became a big issue. Escalation was done. The front office manager was very, very furious. He hauled the entire shift and he singled out that person who had taken the registration.
Hmm.
So this team member of mine started looking at the lobby manager for support, and the lobby manager did not support him. He, in fact, pointed fingers back at him that you should have done your job better and stuff.
Hmm.
So team members started looking at me that I might speak in his favor because I knew what the reality was. And for some reason, I did not. I didn't want to ruffle feathers. I was new in the organization. I didn't want to lock horns with the lobby manager.
Hmm.
And I felt so guilty and I felt miserable for a couple of days that I let down my team member who was looking at me for support. I couldn't eat, sleep for a couple of days. The guilt was very, very high. My grandfather was a wonderful, reader of people. He could figure out that something wasn't well, and I would always meet him, touch his feet before going to the office the next morning. So I met him casually, and he says, "What's wrong?" So I narrated the entire episode to him,
Hmm.
and he told me something, and that lesson has stayed me, you know, till date. He said, "Leadership is all about courage and integrity, and if you cannot practice either of them, or you do not have either of them, then you should step down immediately. You're not fit to be a leader."
Yeah.
And that thought stayed with me for at least half a day when I was in office, and I went to the office with a newfound energy and dose of courage. And I first thing I did was apologize to my team member. I confronted the lobby manager, telling him that he was wrong and he needs to address the situation. And we
Hmm.
did. We addressed the issue finally. But that one lesson has stayed with me for life.
Yeah.
You will lose some, you will win some. Corporate politics are there everywhere. But I
Yeah.
think if you practice integrity and courage, you will sleep better.
Absolutely right. So wonderful story, Pixie. And I think it takes a lot of courage to even speak about this in front of everyone all these years down the line. And again, like you said, courage, integrity, again, two things that AI really cannot replace. It is part of an innate culture. So wonderful to see this coming through. Great. So of course, you worked at Meridian, which means you have this background in hospitality, warmth. You spoke about courage, integrity. Are those the values that also influence how you're building learning and culture experiences today, not just at Maxis, but throughout what you've done?
I think there are a lot of similarities between the hospitality industry and how we run learning and culture in any organization. I see a lot of similarities. I think,
Hmm.
firstly, it's all about CX, all about it. We always take a human centered approach. There is attention to individual needs. We need to have a service mindset. We got to be resourceful. Of course, the
Yeah.
listening skills and the empathy, art of storytelling. I think all these different, call them values, traits, they become part of your DNA. And these
Yeah.
are easily transferable from one industry to the other. And I
Yeah.
think they're common to both.
Right. Right. Okay. Wonderful. And I think In my experience, over the last 15 years working with L&D leaders like you, I've seen companies, different sizes, different industries running multiple learning programs. But I think the single pattern that I found is wherever learning teams and talent teams think of it from a consumer experience, how is the actual learner going to react to this learning program, as opposed to saying, okay, we need to run X number of learning programs. I think those have always been way, way more successful. So
Correct.
wonderful to hear that. Right now, of course, we've been talking about AI, and no conversation anywhere is complete without mention of AI. And you at the start mentioned that AI is going to be a game changer in a lot of ways for L&D. But of course, there are other things that it will not. But how do you imagine the learning space going forward? Maybe in the next, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years is too long a time frame in this age. Maybe the next 2 3 years, do you see any changes major happening or the trends going forward?
Again, a very good question, Aman. I think there are number of things that AI is doing and will do. But if I were to talk about one, I think the game changer would be hyper personalization at scale
Hmm.
that AI will be able to do. See, today or in the recent till the recent past, we would have standard training programs for all. We would go with a one size fit all philosophy, whether for the right or the wrong reason, because there's always a trade off between cost of doing learning versus the actual learning
Yeah.
program and driving impact, right? It's always a trade off. Let me give you an analogy. Let's say if one has to lose weight and get fit, right?
Hmm.
Whether somebody's preparing for a marathon or a weightlifting competition or whatever, right? Now, the early approach would be have a standard diet, have a standard workout regime that people would do. Then it evolved to a stage where it became very, very tailored. So, sports people, for example, will have their proper medical checkup done. Everybody would have varying, medical indicators pointing towards different things. And then a program would be designed based on your medical indicators, based on your needs, based on your goals, etc. The question
Yeah.
is, why can't we do it in the learning space, especially with the
Yeah.
help of AI?
Yeah.
The way I see, uh, you've got multiple systems. You have the HR information system where your performance data is stored. You've got talent intelligence platform where your career levels, skill levels are mapped, etc. And you've got your learning management system or a learning experience platform where the entire learning ecosystem sort of sits. Now
Yeah.
imagine if these three systems, without any manual intervention, start talking to each other. Yeah, you get certain signals, your employer performance ratings, your manager feedback, demands of your role, your career level, expected behavior, expected skill levels. They all start talking to each other,
Yeah.
and this information gets conveyed to the LMS or the LXP, and we ask the LXP to design a tailored program for a
Program.
certain bureau for an individual person expecting certain outcomes to come, and it
Yeah.
happens in a GP.
Wow. Yeah.
And not just the program is designed, but it can also monitor progress. It can do online assessments to see whether your skill level has changed or not, etc.
Yeah.
So the ecosystem changes, your learning methodology changes. Now,
Yeah.
I know this will disrupt a lot of roles in the learning space. Learning analysis will go out of the door and manual skill mapping will go out of the door. But that's the way forward. So
Yeah.
even professionals in the learning space would have to embrace AI and become experts and see how do you carve your next S curve rather than just improving the way you're working today. It'll have to be um, a very different way of thinking how learning needs to be driven in the organization.
Yeah.
So
I love that. And
personalization.
yeah, and of course, what you said is the ultimate goal. It of course becomes really difficult when as the company size becomes more and more, and Maxis has about what 5,000 employees, 6,000 employees. But imagine for a company with 80,000 employees, the challenge is much more, and we've seen this real time, right, across organizations. Different systems don't talk to each other. People don't know what's happening. Maybe just a quick follow up to that. Assuming that there is technology, which I surely think will happen, if not in the next 2 3 years, maybe the next 5 10 years. But do you think it'd be harder for some industries to adapt to it versus others? For example, financial services, right? Given that they have really strict security protocols, so maybe there are some uh, you know uh, devices or some technology that can only stay within the bank, that should not be able to talk outside. Do you think that's going to be a challenge, or those barriers are all going to go away?
I think eventually the barriers will go away. People will find a way.
Hmm.
See, again, it's a trade off, right? Every risk that's highlighted has a trade off with driving efficiency or driving innovation. So
Yeah.
somewhere that balance would be maintained. But I think people will find a way.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Great.
20
Uh,
years back, 30 years back, when the entire uh, BPO industry, now called the GCC, started off in India, right? Don't you think we had similar questions coming up at that time? Can we send our employee data to an offshore location? Can we outsource part of our processes to the Wipros and the Infosys to manage? I think all these questions must have come up at that time as well, right?
hmm.
But look at the evolution of the GCC industry today. It's phenomenal growth. Phenomenal
Yeah.
is the word, right?
Yeah.
So with AI coming and the benefits that it brings to the table, I think all industries eventually will have to embrace it
Yeah.
and address these risk challenges which we anticipate.
Nice, nice, great. So maybe last question, Pixie, and again, just to follow up to this, recently at Noldscape we did an L&D report across the globe and specifically Asia Pacific. Really heartening to see that Malaysia is slowly climbing up the ranks when it comes to these AI-led skills, right? Which is great, which means the entire country, all the corporates are adopting this learning, and we've seen that every organization that I go to is doing AI pilots, is doing. But do you see a big blind box that most organizations are ignoring when it comes to approaching AI-led learning today?
Yeah, I think it's more of a. I'll talk more on the philosophy part. I think everybody's trying to sell AI-led training. It's a flavor of the
Yeah,
season.
yeah,
At the same time, a lot of L&D teams are trying to buy them.
hmm,
We need to take a step back and think, are we thinking of the business outcomes we want to drive?
yeah,
Why are we adopting AI-led trainings? What value does it bring to the table? You see, I
yeah,
always believe that learning has to be a or is means to an end, right? It means to an
yeah,
outcome. Now,
right,
that outcome could be you're developing your human capital for succession plan.
hmm,
You're going to improve delivery to your customer, or you're going to drive innovation and come up with new revenue streams and create some financial and CX impact. It has to be one
yeah,
of these three, right?
yeah,
If the AI-led learning can help on any of these front, absolutely, by all means, let's go for it. But if the
hmm,
answer is no, or we haven't thought about it, then I think we take a step back and we need to rethink. Training completion is not equal to training impact or learning impact,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Course is not equal to capability.
yeah,
And I think it's high time we go to focus on the outcomes, on the capability, or what outcome we want to drive as a
yeah.
result of learning.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And the more I think about it, I think one key takeaway for our audience listening in is that if you're ever designing any program, don't just go with the flow just because everybody is investing in AI. Take a step back. And like you said, if the outcome is just to build a culture of learning or to do a checkmark activity, don't do it. Tie it to a business outcome that could be, productivity increase, revenue increase, anything of that sort. I think that's also when you get buy-in at the board level for any investments of this.
Correct. L&D has to be a strategic advisor to the C-suite. L&D
Hmm.
is not a service provider function or an order taking function, and offering a large learning buffet is not equal to L&D excellence.
Correct. Yeah.
It's absolutely fine to say no.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fine to not go with the trend that you see in the market. You just need to have the good reasons to do something,
Yeah.
is what I believe.
Awesome. Amazing. I think great, energizing, rich conversation, Pixie. Thank you for not just sharing these insights, but also I think, stories and reflections from your past that I know will really resonate with our listeners. I personally really, really enjoyed the discussion. So thank you very much. And to everybody else tuning in, thank you for joining us for yet another episode of The Learning Curve. We'll soon be back with more conversations on what it takes to build future ready leaders, organizations, and workplaces. Until next time, take care and keep learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you for having me over. An absolute pleasure.